I think now I'm going to remove the carriage assembly, which should be a matter of just taking out these 3 bolts right in the back here. These 3 bolts right here, and removing this plate. Looking at this plate, I was trying to determine if it made a difference which way it goes on, but it's going to be pretty clear which way it goes on. You can actually see the rub marks here where it rubs the underside of the bed, and on this side, this is the side that obviously has been exposed, facing downward and not rubbing against anything. And it's also got the marks from the screw heads, the cap screws I just removed. And it can't go on this way because it won't do anything. So that's how that basically goes on. And now with that off, I can actually lift up on the back here, and I can lift off that this whole carriage assembly with the cross slide and everything. Oh, I just made that assumption, but I was wrong. Something is still holding that. And I think it has to do with, there's a piece in here, looks like it's being pushed on by these screws. So it looks like you gotta release these lock nuts, loosen these screws, and that has to do with adjusting the clearance up against the bed, I guess. So the side of the ways here. That's not going to work. What has to happen is that has to move over that way to release this edge right here. So it looks like maybe if you take all of these screws all the way out, this metal jib, I'm going to call that a jib, comes out, and that allows the carriage to, or the saddle I should say, to move back that way far enough to then clear it. But I think what's going to be easier for me, for my purposes, is if I just take these 2 bolts out, the remainder of this broken bracket off. I think I could just run the carriage all the way down this end and slide it right off the end. Yep, that worked. So now that I've got that whole carriage assembly off, this is pitching down now because I had to reposition this strap because it was in the way of me sliding the carriage off. And I could raise it back up and reposition it at the end to level it out again, but this actually helps me out over here because now with this tipped up like this, it's going to be easier for me to access the bolts on the bottom here. There's one big one right here, and there's 2 other smaller ones up in here that are what hold the rest of this headstock onto the bed. Alright, to get to this bolt, it's going to be kind of tough with this bracket being in the way. So I really need to see about maybe taking this assembly off. This, when I had this off, this washer slides out, but then this piece doesn't seem to be coming out. So I'm thinking I'm going to take these 2 cap screws out, which seem to hold this bolt and this box assembly onto the bed, and see if maybe with these 2 cap screws out, and if I take this off and this hardware off, maybe I could slide this whole shaft out this way. So I've run into the first snag of my disassembly. Taking these 2 cap screws out didn't seem to do anything. That box still seems pretty well attached for some reason. And I took this stuff off, and this washer's not going to come off unless I take this Woodruff key out. So I guess I'll try and get that out. I use 2 hands to get that out. Put the camera down. Well, alright, so that's still not really doing anything for me. But I can see now that I'm pretty sure I could slide this whole bracket off if it wasn't being held on by this bolt head right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this locking nut right there, and then this locking nut that keeps, the way this works is when you loosen this nut right here, that allows this bracket to slide and be adjusted by virtue of this slotted hole. But in order to keep the bolt from turning, there's a second locking nut right here, right up against the bed. So what I'm going to do is loosen this locking nut and that locking nut, and I should be able to actually unscrew that whole bolt from the bed and then take this whole bracket assembly off and leave that gear on it. Good news. As soon as I got that broke free, I went to pull this off, I realized that that box is now moving. And it looks like this whole thing is going to come off as one assembly. So I think what's going on is I think this is pressed onto there. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a light press fit. So now what appears to be holding this is a pinion gear up there. That's held on by, well, oddly enough, it's held on by this nut. But I don't think it passes through anything on the way there, so maybe it's just a matter of wiggling it off. Yeah, that worked. Came off as a whole assembly. I should be able to actually slide this off of here if I need to for cleaning later, but for the time being I'm going to leave that as an assembly also. So all that's left now, 3 bolts, and the base of the headstock will come off of the bed. And then I think I'm going to be able to just carry this down to the basement in just pieces without even worrying about lifting or sliding anything really heavy. The bed's going to be the heaviest part, and I think it's going to be manageable after I get this headstock off. Oh, it turns out that last large bolt actually is holding this cross piece off. So once you get these 2 little bolts in the back off and you loosen that cross piece, this is actually supposed to slide right off of the, uh-oh. Ooh, I didn't see that. It's a brass shim right there. Just came off with my fingers. That's not good. But I didn't. See if there were any stuck to the undersides of those bearing caps. Okay, so I just put the brakes on, took a look at these bearing caps, found out that this bearing cap did have another shim stuck to it, so it had 1 shim on each side, and I've reassembled it and just loosely put the bolts in so I can keep that all together. So I can keep the shims the same location where they were when I took them out. And then this bearing cap here had no shims on either side. I double checked. So we'll have to see during reassembly what kind of clearance there is in the bearing there, and that might, I'm just probably going to put it back together the way it was and run it the way it was, unless the clearance is really excessive. Okay, it's really a tight fit for that cross piece to come out through this way, but you just tap it on this side to break it free. Look at all that gunk that was underneath there. So it's going to make it really easy to clean this now. Alright, so now I'm just going to carry all these pieces down to the basement, lay them out, and we'll finish cleaning them up down there.